My name is Vreth Solikai, and I want to make one thing absolutely clear before I tell you what happened on that cursed, fog-covered, absolutely terrible planet called Arundel 9. I was not afraid. I was professionally concerned. There is a difference. Fear is when your secondary heart starts beating faster than your primary one. Concern is when both hearts stop entirely for about 3 seconds and then resume at a speed that your physician would describe as, quote, deeply alarming. Vreth, please stop doing field work. So yes, I was professionally concerned. Let me paint you a picture. Our scout unit, the 42nd branch of the Calveth Exploratory Fleet, had been assigned to Arundel 9 for routine mapping. Routine, that word. I want to find whoever decided this mission was routine and ask them very calmly if they have ever personally visited Arundel 9, because I have, and the only thing routine about that planet is that it routinely tries to kill everything on it. The atmosphere was breathable, barely. The gravity was slightly higher than Calveth standard, which meant every step felt like walking with a small moon strapped to each leg. The flora was purple and aggressive. Not aggressive in a metaphorical sense. Aggressive in the sense that one of our junior scouts, a young male named Dovek Terran, reached out to touch what appeared to be a very pretty purple flower, and the flower reached back. He still has all his fingers. We checked. Twice. But none of that was what made Arundel 9 famous. What made Arundel 9 famous was that it was, according to every scan, every probe, every satellite image we had taken over the past 2 orbital cycles, completely uninhabited. No cities. No roads. No structures, no energy signatures, no radio waves, nothing. Just forest, just fog, just that horrible purple flora that apparently had opinions about being touched. So when our communications officer, a sharp-tongued female named Brix Ovally, looked up from her scanner with an expression that I can only describe as, someone just told her the fleet cafeteria ran out of fermented kell root, I should have paid more attention. Vreth, she said, very slowly, I am picking up heat signatures, wildlife. I said because I was the commanding officer and it was my job to sound calm. Large wildlife. Large wildlife exists, moving in a coordinated pattern. Large coordinated wildlife exists. Vreth. She turned the scanner toward me. There are 47 of them. They are forming a perimeter around our camp. And they have been doing this for the past 6 minutes without making a single sound. I looked at the scanner. I looked at Brix. I looked at the scanner again. Everyone, I said, very quietly, please pick up your equipment. We are going to walk, not run, toward the dropship. Nobody argued. This was how you knew the situation was serious, because our unit argued about everything. We argued about meal schedules. We argued about who got the corner sleeping pods. Dovak once submitted a formal complaint about the ambient lighting in the cargo bay, but right now every single one of my 12 scouts was silently, efficiently, and with great personal urgency moving toward the ship. We made it maybe 40 meters before the forest made its first sound. Now, I want you to understand something about sound. Calveth biology is finely tuned to threat detection. We have 3 sets of auditory receptors. We can hear frequencies that most species cannot. We are, as a species, very good at hearing things that want to hurt us. What came out of that forest was not a sound I had a category for. It was low. So low it was almost more of a vibration than a sound. It started on the left, rolled through the ground itself, and then was answered from the right. Then from behind us, then from in front of us between our unit and the dropship, which, I want to note for the record, was extremely rude. Dovak made a noise that I believe was meant to be a brave battle cry and came out as something closer to the sound a small aquatic creature makes when startled. I did not comment on this, partly out of professionalism, mostly because I made the exact same noise at the exact same time. Formation, I said, because that was the protocol. And protocol was the only thing standing between a commanding officer and the complete and total loss of composure. We pulled together. 12 scouts, backs inward, weapons raised, facing the tree line. The fog had thickened while we were not paying attention to it, which was either a natural weather phenomenon or the universe's way of saying, I really want this to be dramatic. The roaring continued, not constant. That was the unsettling part. It came in waves. One side would go silent, and then another would answer, and then a third voice from a direction we had not accounted for would join in, deeper than the others, longer, like it was making a statement rather than a threat. It is communicating, Brix whispered. Do not say that, I whispered back. I am saying it because it is true. I know it is true. I am asking you not to say it because saying it out loud makes it worse. Vreth, the truth does not become worse because you acknowledge it. Brix, I swear on every ancestor I have ever had, This is not the time for philosophy. The tree line moved. Not swayed, not rustled, moved. The trees themselves did not shift, but something between them did. Something large enough that its passage displaced the purple foliage in a visible wave 20 meters wide, pressing toward us at a pace that was not fast but was absolutely horrifyingly deliberate. Our youngest scout, a small female named Tula Vesh, who had been quiet this entire time and who I had privately hoped was handling this better than the rest of us, pointed her scanner toward the tree line and then held it up so the rest of us could see the reading. Bipedal, roughly 2 meters tall, bone density significantly above standard, carrying objects, manufactured objects. They have tools, Tula said. Yes, I said. That means they are intelligent. Yes, that means this planet is not uninhabited. Tula, yes, I am aware of what it means. The first one stepped out of the tree line, and I want to say that I maintained complete composure. I want to say that. I cannot say that because what stepped out of the fog was something that the Calveth database had a file on but that none of us had ever expected to encounter in person on a planet that was supposed to be empty, in a situation that was supposed to be routine, human, Homo sapiens. Colloquially, informally, and with increasing frequency in certain military circles, Deathworlders. I had read the reports. Every commanding officer in the exploratory fleet received the briefings. We knew about humans. We knew about Earth, about their biology, about their baffling relationship with danger, about the fact that their home planet was so hostile that their species had developed something their own scientists called the fight-or-flight response, and then apparently decided that flight was for other species. What the briefings had not fully prepared me for was the sight of one in person, in the fog, holding a weapon that was clearly not standard Calveth issue and staring at our unit with an expression that I could not fully read but that contained absolutely zero of the fear I felt I was rightfully projecting at that moment. It was a female, shorter than the estimated average but built in a way that the briefings described as compact musculature, and that I would personally describe as the kind of being that a predator looks at and quietly decides it has other plans today. Her hair was dark and pulled back from her face. She wore layered clothing with no insignia I recognized. She held her weapon in both hands, pointed not quite at us, which I chose to interpret as a good sign. She looked at our formation. She looked at our weapons. She looked at Dovak, who was still holding his scanner in front of himself like it was a shield, which it was not. And then, to the tree line behind her, she said 2 words, "Stand down." The roaring stopped, immediately, completely, like someone had pressed a control that silenced the entire forest. One moment the air was saturated with that deep resonating sound, and the next there was nothing but fog and the very quiet sound of 12 Calveth scouts trying to breathe normally. The female looked back at us. "Sorry about that," she said. "Standard perimeter check. We didn't know you were friendly." I opened my mouth. I closed my mouth. I opened it again. "You did not know we were friendly," I repeated. "Correct. So your standard response to uncertainty was to surround our camp with 47 individuals and produce sounds at a volume that I believe briefly disrupted my neurological function." She tilted her head. "Would you have preferred we just walked in?" I thought about this for a moment that was longer than I intended. "No," I admitted. She nodded like this was a completely reasonable conversation. "I'm Mira Selk. This is my unit. We've been on Arendal 9 for about 9 months. Who are you, and why does your ship have Calveth registration marks?" 9 months. They had been here for 9 months. On a planet our probes had described as uninhabited, in conditions that our environmental reports had classified as, and I am quoting directly, unsuitable for extended biological habitation. "I am Vreth Solikai," I said. 42nd Branch, Calveth Exploratory Fleet, and I am beginning to have significant questions about our probe data. For the first time, Mira Selk smiled. It was, I want to note, the kind of smile that should have been a warning. "Come on," she said. "We'll show you the camp. We've got food if you eat carbon-based proteins. And you're going to want to hear what we found about 3 kilometers north of here because whatever it is, it's been making noises that even we haven't categorized yet." Dovak looked at me. I looked at Dovak. Around us the fog shifted. From the tray line, 46 other humans began to emerge, quiet and organized and armed, watching us with a calm that I found simultaneously reassuring and deeply unsettling. "Of course," I said, because I was a professional. "Lead the way." Behind me I heard Brix mutter, very quietly, "I want it noted in the official log that I suggested we leave 20 minutes ago." I did not respond, but she was right. She was absolutely right. The human camp was, and I say this with complete professional objectivity, absolutely insane. Not in the way that a disorganized camp is insane, not in the way that a poorly planned expedition looks insane. It was insane in the way that something built by beings who had fully accepted their circumstances and decided to make the best of them is insane, which, I was beginning to understand, was a specifically human kind of insane. They had structures. Real ones, not the temporary pressurized shelters that Calveth Field units used. The ones that folded out of a case and were designed to be packed up and moved within 4 minutes in case of emergency. These humans had built walls. From the trees, the aggressive, opinion-having purple trees of Arundel 9, which I had personally watched attempt to grab Dovak by the wrist, had apparently met the humans and decided that becoming a load-bearing wall was a more dignified fate than whatever else they had planned. There were 48 of them in total, including Mira. Different builds, different heights, different apparent ages. They moved around the camp with the kind of efficiency that comes not from following a schedule but from 9 months of knowing exactly where everything was and exactly what needed doing at any given moment. A few of them looked at our group with open curiosity. Most of them looked at us with the particular expression that I would later come to recognize as a human evaluating whether something was a threat, deciding it was not, and then filing that information away and returning to whatever they were doing. One of them, a large male with a scar running from his left ear to his jaw, was sharpening something. I watched him for a moment longer than was probably polite. "That is a blade," Tulla said quietly, next to me. "Yes, a manual blade. For close-range engagement." "Yes, he is sharpening it the way someone sharpens something they intend to use." "Tulla, I am just noting it." "I know you are just noting it. Please stop noting things out loud." Mira walked us through the camp without ceremony, pointing things out with the casual energy of someone giving a tour of a place they had long since stopped finding remarkable. Storage units along the eastern wall, sealed against the humidity. Water processing station because the surface water on Arundel 9 was, and she used this word without any visible distress, technically drinkable if you run it through the filter twice and don't think too hard about the color. Medical bay in the central structure. Communication array on the roof, which explained why we had detected no signals because, she explained without elaborating, they had reasons for keeping transmissions low. "What reasons?" I asked. She looked at me. "We'll get to that. We would get to that." I was beginning to understand that a significant portion of this conversation was going to be things we would get to. She sat us down at a table in the central structure which had a roof and walls and a floor made of the same purple wood, all of it fitting together with the kind of precision that suggested someone in this unit had strong opinions about construction. She put a container of something warm in front of each of us, and I appreciated the gesture even though I had absolutely no intention of consuming anything that had been prepared on a planet whose flora had attempted to injure our junior scout. Dovak drank his immediately. I made a note to monitor him for symptoms. 9 months ago, Mira said, sitting across from me with her hands wrapped around her own container. "We were assigned to Arundel 9 for a different reason than you. Not mapping. Recovery." "Recovery of what?" "A probe. Specifically a probe that went dark about 11 months ago after sending back one very unusual data packet before it stopped transmitting." I looked at Brix. Brix looked at me. "What was in the data packet?" I asked. Mira reached into a case beside her and placed a small device on the table. She pressed a control, and a projection appeared above it. "Data readings. Atmospheric, seismic, biological." "Biological. This planet is not uninhabited," Mira said. "It never was. The life signs are not on the surface." Tula leaned forward. "Underground? 3 kilometers north of this camp, below the surface. We found the entry point about 6 months ago. We have been mapping it since." Mira paused. She had the expression of someone choosing their words carefully, which on a human face looked different from how it looked on a Calveth face but communicated the same thing. "Whatever is down there, it is large, it is old. And approximately 3 weeks ago it woke up." The central structure was very quiet for a moment. "Define woke up," I said. "Before 3 weeks ago the readings were passive. Biological activity consistent with a dormant state, slow metabolic function, no movement, no sound. 3 weeks ago something changed. The metabolic readings increased by a factor of about 12. We started hearing vibrations through the ground at irregular intervals. And 5 days ago..." She stopped. "5 days ago?" I said. "5 days ago, one of my scouts, a male named Garrett Milo, was doing perimeter work about 200 meters from the entry point. He reported seeing something emerge partially from the entrance. He described it as," she looked at her notes, not because she needed to, I could tell she had memorized them, but because looking at notes was a way of organizing what came next. "Large, very large, not a shape he had a word for. It looked at him. He is certain it looked at him specifically, not at the area, at him, and then it went back down." "And Garrett Milo?" I said. "Is he?" "He is fine. He is the one you saw sharpening the blade when you came in. That explained the blade? That explained the sharpening. That explained the expression. We need to leave, Brick said, with great clarity and zero ambiguity. Vreth, we need to go back to the dropship and we need to leave and we need to file a report and let people who are paid significantly more than us make decisions about this. That is an entirely reasonable position, I said. Thank you, Mira, I said. How close is the entry point? Brix put her face in her hands. Mira smiled again. That same smile. 3 kilometers. About 40 minutes on foot through the north section of the forest. We go in pairs always, and we do not go after the light drops. There are things in the upper forest at night that we have not fully catalogued, and we have decided, collectively, not to learn about them the hard way. The surface wildlife is also hostile. The surface wildlife is, she considered, manageable. We had some early incidents. Everyone still has their original number of limbs, which we consider a success at this point. Dovak touched his wrist instinctively. I will want to see the entry point, I said. I thought you might, Mira said. We go at first light. Tonight you stay here, you sleep, or whatever your rest cycle looks like. And in the morning Garrett and I will take you north. Just Garrett and you, and whoever from your unit you want to bring. I recommend your scanner operator and one other. Small groups move faster and make less sound. Why does the sound matter? Mira picked up her container. She took a long, slow drink. She set it back down. Because, she said, we have noticed that when we move loudly near the entry point, the vibrations from underground get stronger. And we have a working theory that the thing below the surface is using sound to locate objects above it. That is, I searched for the right word. Yeah, Mira said. We know. I took Brix and Tula. Brix because she was the best scanner operator I had and I trusted her readings, and also because leaving her behind would mean listening to her describe in precise and comprehensive detail every terrible decision I had made, whereas if she was with me she would only have time to describe them in summary. Tula because she was sharp and quiet and had not panicked once since we landed on this planet, which, given what this planet had done to us in the past several hours, I considered an exceptional personal quality. We left Dovak in charge of the remaining scouts. He asked 3 questions about this responsibility. I answered 2 of them. The third one was about whether he could try more of the human food, and I told him to use his judgment, which I immediately recognized as an error, but by then we were already moving. The northern forest was different from the sections we had walked through before. Quieter, for one thing. The aggressive purple flora was still present but seemed less interested in us, which I chose to interpret as a positive development and not as an ominous sign that we were moving into territory where even the plants had decided not to bother. The fog was heavier here, lying close to the ground in thick, slow-moving sheets that curled around our legs as we walked. Garrett Milo moved ahead of us, and I want to describe how he moved because it was instructive. He made almost no sound. A being of his mass on terrain this uneven, producing that little noise, was not an accident, it was a skill. He placed each foot with the deliberateness of someone who had learned through experience and probably some personal discomfort exactly how to distribute weight on unfamiliar ground. He held his weapon low and ready but not raised, which Brix had explained to me was the human equivalent of a drawn but unthreatening posture. He had not said a word since we left camp. Not one. He had nodded at me when Mira introduced us and then turned north and started walking, and I had gotten the strong impression that Garrett Milo was a being who communicated primarily through action and considered words a resource to be spent carefully. Mira walked beside me and explained what she could in a low voice. The entry point looks natural from the surface, like a sinkhole partially covered by root growth. We almost missed it. The first scan didn't flag it because the depth reading was inconsistent. The scanner kept returning different measurements, which we now think is because whatever is below was moving. Moving when you scanned it. Moving every time we scanned it. We have done 11 scans over 6 months. We have 11 different depth readings. The range is between 40 and 400 meters. She paused. It is not a fixed space. Tula, walking behind us, said very quietly, "It is organic." "That is our theory," Mira confirmed. "Whatever is down there, the space itself may be part of it." We heard the entry point before we saw it. A low vibration, the same quality as the sounds that had come from the forest the night before, but slower and deeper and continuous in a way that the others had not been. It came up through the soles of my feet and resonated in my chest, and my second heart did the thing it had done the night before, the stopping and then the resuming too fast, and I focused very hard on maintaining a composed expression. The entry point was exactly as Mira had described. A rough opening in the earth, perhaps 4 meters across, partially covered by a web of purple roots that had grown over it in a pattern that seemed, when I looked at it directly, almost deliberate, almost decorative. The ground around it was disturbed, recently, soil turned over and pressed down in patterns that, when I looked at them from the right angle, were too regular to be random. Garrett crouched at the edge and looked down into it without speaking. Mira crouched beside him. I crouched beside Mira, and the three of us looked into a darkness that the vibration was rising out of like heat. Brix was scanning. I could hear the soft processing sound of her equipment behind me. "Vreth," she said, in a tone that I had learned over 2 years of working with her meant she had found something she did not want to have found. "What?" "The metabolic reading. The one Mira said increased by a factor of 12 3 weeks ago. Yes, it has increased again since this morning's baseline. It is currently..." A pause. "Vreth, it is currently 40 times the dormant baseline." The vibration through the ground got suddenly, sharply stronger, not gradually. Immediately. Like something had heard a word it recognized. Garrett stood up from his crouch in one smooth, fast motion and took 3 steps back from the edge, weapon raised, and the look on his face was the first expression I had seen him make, and it was the expression of someone who had been waiting for this and had decided, fully and completely, exactly what they were going to do about it. From the entry point, something rose, not climbed, not emerged. Rose with the slow, terrible certainty of something that has decided it is done waiting, done being patient, done being dormant, done being 40 meters or 400 meters below the surface of a planet that a Calveth probe had scanned 11 times and called empty. It was dark. It was enormous. It did not have a shape that fit neatly into any category my nervous system had prepared for. A mass of dense biological architecture that absorbed the fog rather than displacing it, limbs or appendages or structural elements arranged in a geometry that suggested not evolution but intention, built rather than grown, purposed rather than accidental. It rose until its upper mass was level with the tree line. It made no sound. The vibration had stopped entirely, which was worse than the vibration because the vibration had been the sound of it waking up, and now it was awake, and awake things that are not afraid of you do not bother to announce themselves. It oriented toward us. Brix made a sound that was not a word. Tula made no sound at all, which I found oddly stabilizing. Mira Selk looked at the thing that had just risen out of the planet, and then she looked at Garrett, and she said one word, "Positions," and then Garrett Milo, who had not spoken since we left camp, who had communicated entirely through motion and intent, raised his weapon, checked something on it with a fast, practiced motion, and said the word that I would spend the next several years thinking about, the word that was, in that moment, the most human word that had ever been spoken on any planet in any star system I had ever visited, the word that somehow contained an entire civilization's worth of philosophy about the relationship between intelligent life and things that are bigger than it. "Reload," he said. To no one in particular, to himself, to the universe, to the fog and the purple trees and the thing that was looking at us without fear. And then he fired. The sound was extraordinary. Not the vibration from below, not the organized roaring of the perimeter the night before, but a sharp, flat, percussive sound that split the fog and hit the thing in its upper mass and did not, it was very clear, cause it any meaningful harm. But that was not the point. The point was that Garrett Milo, standing on the edge of a hole in a planet that was supposed to be empty, facing something that had been asleep for longer than our civilization, had been writing things down calmly, without hesitation, without theater, without waiting to see if it was hostile or what it wanted or whether it might be reasoned with or whether there was a regulation about this, fired his weapon at it and then said reload and started doing exactly that. Mira was already moving, not retreating, moving, laterally, creating distance between herself and Garrett while keeping the entry point in her line of sight, pulling a different weapon from her equipment, doing 3 things at once with the calm efficiency of someone running through steps they had rehearsed for exactly this scenario. "Back toward the tree cover," she said. To me, to Brix, to Tula, her voice level and practical. "Not running, walking, keep your feet under you, the ground near the entry point can shift." Garrett, left side, left side. Garrett confirmed, not looking away from the thing. The thing moved. It was fast, which nothing that large should have been, and it moved toward the sound, toward Garrett's position specifically, and Garrett was already not in that position anymore, already 3 meters to the left, already reloaded, and the second shot hit it from a new angle and it made a sound, finally a sound like pressure releasing from a very large container, and then it paused. It paused. It had not expected to be shot at. I was certain of this. I was certain because the pause had the quality of a recalculation, an updating of assumptions, a moment in which a very large and very ancient thing was processing the information that the small bipeds on the surface were not behaving the way things on the surface had previously behaved. Vreth? Tulla said very calmly, from somewhere behind me. Yes, my scanner is reading a secondary biological signature approximately 40 meters east of the entry point. Subsurface. Rising. There are 2 of them, Brick said. There are 2 of them, I confirmed, mostly to myself, because I needed to hear it out loud to believe it. Mira, I said. I see it, she said. She had already turned 45 degrees east. She had already adjusted. She had already, in the 3 seconds since Tulla had reported the secondary signature, integrated that information and updated her positioning accordingly. She looked at me across the gap between us. Fog swirling. The first thing still paused and recalculating, the second signature rising from the east. You have field weapons, she said. It was not a question. She had noticed. Of course she had noticed. We do. You know how to use them. We do. Good, she said. And then, for the second time that morning, she smiled that smile. The one that should have been a warning and was, now that I understood it, actually something else entirely. Something that a species develops when it has spent long enough facing things that are larger and older and more powerful than itself and decided, repeatedly without exception, to face them anyway. Welcome to Arendal 9, Mira Selk said. Watch your left. I watched my left. I raised my weapon, and somewhere in the fog behind us Garrett Milo said, Reload. We stood there, on that impossible planet, beside those impossible people, and we did not run. We held the line, because when you are standing next to a species that has never in its entire documented history decided that the correct answer to something terrifying was to turn around, something happens to you. Something in your nervous system updates. Something in your secondary heart settles. We held the line, and the things below Arendal 9 learned, that morning in the fog in the purple forest with the vibration rising through the ground and the sharp flat sound of weapons filling the air, what every other species in this region of the galaxy had already learned, that humans do not run, that humans reload, and that if you wake up expecting easy prey, and you find humans standing on the ground above you, then you have made a mistake that is very old and very common and that ends, without exception, the same way. The same exact way, every single time.